It seems like the baby has something to say. At the celebration for my son's 100th day since birth, my 8-year-old niece began to say this while glancing at my husband. Can you tell me what the baby is saying? When my niece said, sure, cheerfully, she began to say the most astonishing things. In the midst of our relatives murmuring, my husband turned pale and trembled slightly. No wonder, as the niece had figured out an outrageous plan that should have been known only to my husband, and I clenched my trembling fist in surging anger. My name is Jennifer. I'm a 24-year-old housewife. I married my husband Robert a year and a half ago, who is 2 years older and a company employee, and we had a son, Benjamin. Every day, I was busy with unfamiliar parenting, but we three were living happily. My sister and her husband, who live nearby, frequently came to our house and have been a great help, assisting with household chores and providing companionship since I was pregnant. While talking to my sister one day, I heard something shocking from her. That was, my niece Emily, who was 8 years old, had a strange power. One day, when my sister was going out with Emily seriously suggested a different route, saying, "It would be better to go this way because there will be an accident if we go the usual way." Out of precaution, my sister followed Emily's advice. The next day, they found out from the news that a massive accident involving multiple cars had happened on the route they were supposed to take. My sister was scared when she thought about what would have happened if she hadn't believed Emily's words. In addition to that, Emily had also predicted that a burglary would occur in the house next door, and it did happen. The neighbor, who was persuaded by my sister in advance, had evacuated to our parents' house with her valuables on that day, so no harm was done. However, as someone who's not a fan of the occult, I was scared when I heard my sister's story and didn't believe that Emily had a mysterious power. I also told my husband about Emily's story, but he didn't take it seriously and just shrugged it off, saying, "Wow, that's amazing." Around the time I was pregnant, my husband started coming home drunk late at night more and more often. I'm sure Robert will change once the baby is born and he becomes a father. That's what I was hoping for, but nothing changed even after the birth. "We'll raise the child together after he's born." Robert's words, which had been like a mirage, were all left to me to handle after the birth. What's worse, my son, who had finally fallen asleep, often woke up because of Robert's loud voice saying, "I'm home," when he came home drunk. I ended up having to continue to soothe my crying son Benjamin in my arms. "Hey, could you please moderate your drinking and come home a little earlier? Benjamin wakes up, you know." "I can't help it. I have work socializing. Do you realize who's providing for our life? Don't complain all the time." Upon hearing my husband's yelling, my son started crying even more. "Be quiet, Benjamin. Jennifer, you're his mother. Calm Benjamin down." I was angered by that comment, but there was no point in arguing with my husband, who was drunk and overconfident, so I had no choice but to go to the bedroom and put my son to sleep. 2 weeks later, on my husband's day off, my sister and niece came to meet my son for the first time. Upon seeing little Benjamin, my niece, Emily, cooed, "Aw, he's so tiny and cute." But after a while, she started glancing at my husband, Robert. "Emily, what's up?" Jennifer, the baby seems to have something to say." Emily whispered to me, saying, "Keep this between us. Don't let Robert know." Upon hearing what she said, I was so astonished that I lost my words and found myself staring at my husband. Robert, oblivious to all of this, looked rather confused. "But babies can't talk yet." "That's the truth. That's what I'm telling you." "But still." "He doesn't want to leave Mom, so he's warning you about Dad." I couldn't believe the unrealistic story, but my niece was so serious with tears in her eyes that I couldn't help but worry. So, after my sister and niece left, I asked my husband, "Are you hiding something from me?" He quickly denied it.
"Why would you suddenly bring up something like that?"
"Huh? I was just asking."
"I'm not hiding anything, and I'm not doing anything that should worry you. Please rest assured."
"Well, alright then." Contrary to his words, his eyes were clearly dodging, and his demeanor was suspicious. Then my husband, who never usually does this, started changing our son's diaper himself, and I felt even more out of place. Could it be? Is Robert hiding something from me? The mysterious words Emily had said wouldn't leave my mind, and I started to feel uneasy about my husband. The next day, after my husband went to work, my sister and niece suddenly showed up at my house. "Sorry for coming so suddenly. Emily insisted on coming to Jennifer's place." My sister looked apologetic, but my niece's expression was serious. "Don't apologize, sis. Welcome. Emily, please come in." When I nodded, my niece neatly arranged her shoes and entered the house, looking fondly at Benjamin, who was sleeping in the crib. But while I was preparing a drink in the kitchen, I noticed that my niece had gone to my husband's study and was staring at one point. "Emily, what's going on?" "Jennifer, it's hidden here." "What?" When I followed my niece's pointing finger to my husband's bookshelf, I found his hidden diary and some documents tucked between the books. I had no idea my husband kept a diary, but I couldn't help but peek inside, even though I felt bad about it. There, in vivid detail, was a shocking plan my husband had been secretly concocting. I can't believe he was planning something like this. I was scared, my hands were shaking, and at that moment, I finally realized that Emily's mysterious power that my sister had told me about was real. When I showed the diary to my sister, she was surprised, but she gently held my hand and said, "It's okay, I will protect you, Jennifer. Because I'm worried about you, Jennifer, can Emily and I come here whenever Robert is off work?" "Of course, sis, thank you." As I felt reassured by my strong sister, tears started to flow. My niece was looking up at me, worried. "I'm sorry for doubting you before, sis. Emily's words were true, weren't they?" "I told you, didn't I? But I'm really glad we caught it before it got serious." "That's true. It's all thanks to Emily. Thank you." "Not at all. You're welcome." Although I returned a smile to my niece who was smiling shyly, I felt my love for my husband gradually turning into resentment. I won't let this go. I'll get back at him. Thinking this, I decided to take revenge on my husband at our son's first meal ceremony, where both of our parents would be present. From then on, my sister and niece would come to our house whenever my husband was off. However, my husband, who had been friendly at first, gradually became grumpy. Eventually, he started wanting to go out to be alone with me, even when my sister and niece were there.
Hey sis, do you mind taking care of little Benjamin for a while so Jennifer and I can go on a date, just the two of us?
"No, that's impossible, Robert. Benjamin will just cry nonstop without his mama, right?"
But I think Jennifer needs a break sometimes too. Even just getting outside and breathing in the fresh air could be refreshing.
"Well, in that case, there's no need to go out and about. Why don't you two go out into the backyard and get some fresh air? It's such a beautiful day, it'll definitely feel good." My sister always had a clever rebuttal that left him without a comeback, careful not to upset him. That's when I started noticing that Robert seemed to be irritable all the time. Then we finally reached the day of Benjamin's first bite ceremony. For this special occasion, my parents, my sister, and her husband, and my in-laws gathered at our home. I prepared a meal with all my heart and began the ceremony by placing the dishes on Benjamin's special eating utensils.
"Benjamin, look over here." So cute.
Robert, completely smitten with his son, was filming the event with a beaming smile. My father-in-law looked at him with a delighted expression and said,
"Robert, you're such a great father."
My mother-in-law, with tears in her eyes, nodded in agreement. Our son, not really understanding what was going on, seemed happy to be surrounded by everyone. And after the ceremony, we all decided to have a meal together. In the warm and friendly atmosphere, my niece Emily wasn't eating much. She just sat quietly watching Benjamin. "Here you go, Emily, your favorite orange juice." My sister tried to distract Emily and talk to her, but Emily didn't respond. I started to worry if she was sensing something again, and that's when it happened. "Robert, do you love money more than Jennifer?" With Emily's words directed at my husband, the lively atmosphere came to a standstill, and everyone froze in their seats, their eyes fixed on Emily. "Emily, why would you say such a thing?" "Because the baby told me so." My sister and I exchanged surprised glances, but everyone else seemed confused.
"Come on, Emily. Little Benjamin can't talk yet, can he? You shouldn't tell lies, okay?"
Robert, sitting next to her, was laughing as he patted Emily's head, but she angrily pushed his hand away. "It's not a lie. The baby said, 'Daddy's trying to get money by pushing Mommy from a high place.'"
"Daddy? Me? No way, I would never do such a thing."
"Benjamin said, 'I love Mommy so much, stop it, Daddy.'" Upon hearing Emily's words, everyone's faces went blank. Among them, only Robert became pale, his lips trembling.
"That's absurd. Stop making things up."
Suddenly angry, Robert banged on the table. Emily's face tensed, and Benjamin looked as if he was about to cry. I wanted to keep things harmonious until the end of the meal, but it seems that's impossible. I stared at my husband with cold eyes. "You've been funneling company expenses to a hostess, haven't you?"
"Huh? What are you talking about?"
I thrust a diary I had found on my bookshelf at my husband, who was looking dumbfounded. "It's all written here. Do you plan to deny it?"
That's about a subordinate at a company. There's no way I would do something so stupid."
My husband's forehead was covered with beads of sweat as he strained to make an excuse with a strained smile.
"Moreover, reading someone else's diary without permission is the lowest thing you could do. It's a violation of privacy, isn't it?"
"I don't have to be blamed by a monster like you for such a thing."
"Huh? What do you mean?"
"Are you still pretending to be ignorant? You've been dipping your hand into the company's finances and planning a horrific scheme to cover it up before it gets discovered. I opened the page of the diary where the plot was written, shoved it in front of him, and he averted his eyes.
So what? That's a story idea I had when I was thinking of writing a novel. A mere diary doesn't serve as any proof.
Oh really? Can you still say that after seeing this? I took out a certain document. Do you recognize this? This is the life insurance policy you've been hiding. Why did you take out $100,000 worth of insurance on me? What were you planning to do?
That is...
You plan to pay off the expenses you embezzled with the insurance money you'd get after you made me disappear. Isn't this solid proof?
No, well...
Actually, it was all revealed to me when my niece whispered in my ear for the first time when she came to see my son. Robert is planning to take Jennifer to a high place because he wants money and push her from behind. I couldn't trust my husband from the moment I heard those words. Both sets of parents stared at the situation with shocked expressions. Cornered by me, he couldn't say anything in response and hung his head, but suddenly he clung to my leg and began to prostrate himself.
Jennifer, I'm sorry. Please pay back the money I misused from the company for me.
Why should I have to do that?
Don't say things like that. We're a couple, aren't we? If the company finds out, I'll be fired. Then how will we live?
My husband had lightly considered my life for his own safety. I regretted deeply why I had gotten together with such a man. I can't be a couple with a scary person like you anymore. Let's divorce for the sake of Benjamin, because it's a bad influence. I shoved the filled out divorce papers in front of my husband and claimed $20,000 in damages and $500 a month in child support.
No way. Benjamin is still small, isn't he? It's not a joke to pay such a large amount of money on top of getting a divorce.
Come on, stop your fussing and sign the divorce papers quickly. The miserable sight of my husband throwing a tantrum like a child, crying, "No, no," and scattering tears made me nauseous. Then my father-in-law, who had been silent until now, shouted at my husband, "Robert, cut it out." Perhaps as a father, he could no longer stand to see his son's shameful behavior. And my husband, who was told by his father-in-law that "you have no right to refuse divorce and compensation," reluctantly signed the divorce papers. After that, my in-laws repeatedly bowed to me, took my husband, and left the house. The next day, I submitted the divorce papers to the municipal office, and I contacted my ex-husband's company and reported that he was misusing the company's expenses. After that, my ex-husband's misdeeds came to light and he was apparently fired from the company. My ex-husband, in order to pay alimony, child support, and compensation to his company, had to sell his house he's currently living in and working as a construction worker from dawn till dusk. I thought about reporting this incident to the police, but the only evidence I had was what my husband had written in his diary. Instead, I decided to be grateful that my niece and son were able to prevent it from happening. Now, I'm back at my parents' house living a peaceful daily life with my son. My sister and niece visit my son almost every day, and I can't help but smile when Emily tells me, "Benjamin says he's happy to be with Mom all the time." Looking at my son laughing heartily, I pledged in my heart to continue pouring out smiles and to protect him firmly with my own 2 hands. My name is Amy. Currently, I live in my husband Bob's family home. Bob is always busy with work and is often away on business trips. As a result, he is seldom at home, and I live with my mother-in-law and our 3-month-old daughter. Bob's father had already passed away. There used to be another person in our household, Bob's sister, but she had to move out due to her job. Bob's sister was always kind to me, so I liked her. It was sad when she left, but there was another reason why I wanted her to stay. My mother-in-law named Karen keeps harassing me. "Hey Amy, what are you doing? The brat is crying. Go comfort her quickly." She said this while pointing at my daughter. Could you please stop referring to her as a brat? She's your granddaughter." "So what? I hate the sound of a crying child. Just do what I said. Comfort the brat." So I had to interrupt my chores and comfort my daughter. But then, if I don't progress with the housework, she'll be upset about that too. Finally, when my daughter fell asleep, I resumed my work. But then Karen started berating me again. "Stop letting the baby sit on the floor. It's in the way." "Well, but you were the one who said not to spend money on a bulky crib that she'll outgrow soon." "Then carry the baby on your back. Just stop letting her sleep on the floor. It's so inconvenient during the day." With Karen shouting like that, my daughter woke up again. Reluctantly, I picked up my daughter and carried her on my back while I continued with the chores. By 3 months, the baby starts to get quite heavy, and carrying her on my back is a significant burden. Given that I had to do housework in such conditions, my work speed slowed down considerably. Somehow, I managed to finish all the chores by dinner time, but Karen was, "How can you be an unfit housewife if you spend all day and not make much progress with the housework? If I were younger, my mother-in-law would have slapped me, and she was abusive to me again." I was mentally exhausted. After putting my daughter to bed late in the night, I reached out to my husband. So, your mom is being completely unreasonable.
I see. I'm sorry I can't be there for you. Apologies, I have a meeting coming up. I'll hear more from you later.
That's what my husband said before he hung up. My husband, Bob, seems busy too, and I can't really depend on him. I have to stand up to my mother-in-law, Karen, on my own, but I feel utterly helpless by myself. One night, my 3-month-old daughter's crying was exceptionally terrible. Maybe she was hungry or something was bothering her. In any case, she was wailing non-stop. Karen, waking up in irritation, stormed in. It's so noisy. Shut that brat up. Do you even know what time it is? It's 11 p.m. It's not too late yet. Shut up. I usually sleep at this time, don't you know? I can't stand her wailing. Do something now. The angrier Karen gets, the more it scares my daughter, causing her to cry. I understand. Please calm down a little. When you raise your voice, it makes the baby cry even more. Don't order me around. I'm the one giving orders here. If you can't quiet her in 5 seconds, I swear I'll hit that baby. What? No way. 1, 2, 3. Indeed, Karen started counting. I want to believe that she would never resort to such inhumane behavior as hitting a 3-month-old baby, but the fact that I can see her doing it is what's terrifying. 5. It seems she's not stopping. Can't be helped. She then readied her fist. No, you're kidding, right, mother-in-law? I can't stand the wailing. Be quiet. And then Karen really did raise her fist to my daughter. I screamed out in disbelief. I never thought she would resort to violence. My daughter was screaming louder than I'd ever heard. Enough of this noise. Shut her up now. She seemed to be completely oblivious to the fact that this was all happening because she had hit my daughter. My daughter ended up with a bruise on her face, and I immediately called for an ambulance. The doctor came and examined my daughter. Doctor, how is she? My daughter. Your daughter is... The doctor paused, and my mind went to the worst possible outcome. You're joking. No. I apologize for the confusion. Your daughter is fine. There might be a bruise. We thought it might leave a mark, but it'll likely heal without leaving a bruise, so please don't worry. Oh, thank God. I felt a wave of relief wash over me and my strength drain away.
But what happened? Did she fall or something?
No, nothing like that. It's just, my mother-in-law who lives with us, she did something unimaginable. Could you tell me more about that? With that, someone entered the examination room. I recognized this person who would help me out of my current situation. The next day, I returned home with this person. Oh my, you ended up spending the night in the hospital? Quite the life you lead, neglecting your housework as a housewife. Karen taunted me with a smirk. I was seething inside. What's with your attitude? You sure had no qualms about doing such a terrible thing to my daughter. I showed Karen my quiet but resolute anger. Huh? What's with the attitude? Got a problem? Of course I have a problem now. You did something so horrible to my daughter. Apologize now. When I raised my voice, Karen yelled back. What the hell? Don't you dare talk back to me. I'm your mother-in-law, you know. A daughter-in-law doesn't dare defy her. Karen's face went beet red. But I did not back down and stared Karen down. You're getting on my nerves. Don't you dare oppose me. Saying that, Karen hit me this time. You just raised your hand, didn't you? Huh? Raising your hand means you're ready, right? Ready for whatever comes next? Whatever might happen to you? At my words, Karen was taken aback. What are you saying? What do you plan to do? Because of what Karen said, I called someone over. Please come in. Upon that invitation, the person who entered was my sister-in-law, Rebecca. Rebecca, why have you come back? I heard Amy's baby had to be rushed to the hospital, so I came as fast as I could. What on earth are you doing to Amy and the baby, Mom? Rebecca was quite furious. Seeing Rebecca so upset, even Karen seemed taken aback. And of course, she would be. After all, Rebecca is a lawyer. Don't tell me you're going to do something as a lawyer just because I might have lost my temper. Karen trembled as she said this. What are you talking about? It's obvious we'll sue, right? I've already told Rebecca that. What? What are you thinking? There's no way I'll allow that. Hearing the word sue, Karen burst out shouting. I'm the one who wants to shout. I feel like I've aged dramatically from the scare of thinking my daughter's life was in danger. Mom, there were clear marks on the baby. It's clearly an assault. And you also just physically threatened Amy, didn't you? You could be charged with battery for that. Hold on, this is just a little family communication. To sue over something like this, don't you think it's a bit hasty? Despite Karen's desperate excuses, I wasn't having any of it. Don't say such nonsense. Can't you see I'm angry? If you're not planning to apologize, I'm just going to proceed with legal action. Wait, at that time I was just a little frustrated. You know how people get irritable when they're tired, right? And when I could hear the wailing all night, it was just too much. Karen was making excuses, but that doesn't make it okay for her to resort to violence. Mother-in-law, it's unfortunate, but I don't plan to forgive someone who just makes excuses like this. I'm going to take legal action immediately, and I'm not intending to negotiate a settlement. Wait, stop. First of all, stop suing me. Do you realize how much I've helped you? Suddenly, Karen started claiming she had helped me. Amy, has Mom ever helped you? No, not at all. Rather than helping, Mother-in-law has only been a hindrance, and even criticizing my housekeeping. I see, and she's talking about having helped. I wonder what she's talking about. Rebecca and I gave Karen a cold stare. I said I helped you, didn't I? Why are you looking at me like that? I did help Amy. When Amy was tired and sleeping, I quietly did some housekeeping. Ah, could it be that you're the one who's been waking up in the middle of the night to snack? I wish you'd stop. It's really bothersome. What? I left some for your breakfast, didn't I? That's just my kindness. That's not what I call kindness. You're just handing me your leftovers, and it was too little to be called breakfast. Plus, you left the dishes without washing them, so it actually made my chores even more difficult. Mom, that's just terrible. Rebecca was appalled at Karen's actions. Hey, don't look at me like that. I have my own troubles too, you know. Troubles? Like what exactly? The truth is, I'm well aware of my own harmful behavior. Karen surprisingly admitted this. You're aware of your harmful behavior? You know, I tend to lash out when I get mad. I understand that it's not right, so I want to change this habit, but people can't always change as easily as they want. Even if I keep telling myself how bad it is, I just can't control myself. Karen continued speaking through her tears. At this rate, I might end up hurting even those I care about the most. Amy, I need you to help me reform. You can tie me up if you need to. Do whatever it takes to make me repent. Karen even ended up prostrating herself. Wait, please calm down, mother-in-law. I think we should talk this through first. Just talking isn't enough to apologize to you. Be stricter with me. Otherwise, I just can't forgive myself for... Karen was genuinely crying, and it seemed she was truly remorseful. Thinking this, I was about to forgive Karen. But then, Amy, don't be fooled. What? Whenever she's in a tight spot, Mom plays a victim to stop being blamed. This is her usual tactic. Even if she does it in front of her own daughter, she can't hide her scheme. What? What are you talking about? I have no idea. I would never think of such a thing. This is just... But Karen was clearly flustered. Looking closer, even though she was crying so much just moments ago, her tears had already dried. She must have been pretending to cry. I can't believe it, mother-in-law, to go to such lengths to evade responsibility. Wait, hold on. I wasn't trying to run away from my mistakes. I just wanted to voice my feelings. Karen was trying to make yet another weak excuse. There's no way such an excuse would work on me. Please, enough with this, mother-in-law. I'm tired of your complaints. All I'm going to do is to proceed with legal actions. My mind is made up. As I said that, Karen's face turned beet red with rage. How dare you? Why should I have to hear such things from you? Do you think I'll just sit by while you take legal actions against me? Although Karen was shouting those words, another person entered the house. Amy, is our daughter all right? It's my husband, Bob. He heard that our daughter had been rushed to the emergency room, and he bowed to his boss and was allowed to come home temporarily. But Bob? Why are you home? Mom, that's not what matters right now. I heard you hit our daughter. How could you? I won't forgive this. Bob was shaking with anger. It was natural, as the daughter he cherishes was subjected to violence. What? Wait a moment, Bob. Why do I have to be told such things? I didn't do anything wrong. No, you clearly did something wrong. If you don't think violence is wrong, you are seriously misguided. Mother-in-law, why don't you stop making excuses? You're alone, but there are 3 of us, Bob, Rebecca, and me. You can't possibly get your way. How dare you? Are you trying to intimidate me by outnumbering me? Isn't that what they call tyranny of the majority? No, it's not about the tyranny of the majority. It's just that we all agreed to discipline you because you're clearly committed a wrongdoing. It's okay if you're under the illusion that you're not wrong, but please stop causing us trouble. As I clearly said those words, Karen began to cry again. It seems that this time her tears were real. Why has it come to this? What on earth have I done? I didn't do anything wrong. Please forgive me. Karen was looked upon with cold eyes by Bob and Rebecca. They must be feeling incredibly sad inside, as their real mother is such a mess. Mom, I always thought you were strange, but I never thought you would be this bad. I no longer consider you as my mother. Neither do I. I'm ashamed to consider such a person as my mother. What? Wait a minute. What are you saying? You are the children I gave birth to after bearing a lot of pain. How dare you speak to me in such a way? Even as Karen was crying and shouting, the two of them continued to give her a cold stare. Let's just leave, Amy. I know a cheap motel. We can live there for a while. In the meantime, I'll proceed with the legal actions against Mom. There's also suspicion of assault and battery, so we have to call the police. Police? Please don't call the police. I've been telling you I didn't do anything wrong. Why has it come to this? Even as Karen cried and shouted, I did as Rebecca said and left the house. I hid out for a while in a budget hotel that Rachel had recommended and left the rest up to her. After that, it seems Karen was charged with assault and battery and ended up in jail. Bob and I saw this as an opportunity to find a new home, and we ended up leasing an apartment. Now, our daughter, Bob, and I are living peacefully in our new apartment. Rachel, who helped me so much, is reportedly having fun despite her busy life as a lawyer. When Karen got out of jail, she had no choice but to return to an empty house. It's quite pitiful. Since we haven't told her where our apartment is, there's no way she can come over. Even if she were to find out, there's a security guard at the entrance, so even if she showed up, she'd just be taken away as a suspicious person. It seems like the labor pains have started. As a first-time mom, I was filled with anxiety. Being far from my hometown, a trip back for childbirth was out of the question. However, my in-laws' house is only about a 10-minute walk away. With a good relationship with my in-laws, I planned to rely on them if anything happened as I prepared for childbirth. My due date was yesterday. Just as my husband left for work and it was conceivable that I could give birth at any time, something that felt like labor pains began.
I just arrived at work. It's not like the baby will be born right away. Let me know if anything changes.
Despite my anxieties, my husband seemed indifferent. Looking back, I realized that his behavior had been strange for some time. My name is Ellie. I quit my job when I found out I was pregnant and am now a 32-year-old full-time housewife. My husband, George, is 2 years older and was a senior at the university I attended. We reunited at a university club gathering 3 years ago and hit it off. Considering our age, we decided to get married soon after. I was happy to be able to get married while still in my late 20s. George's job is demanding, and he often comes home late or has to work on his off days, which only adds to my anxieties. But my mother-in-law occasionally checks on me, and she was a great help when my morning sickness was severe. She's looking forward to the birth of her grandchild, and for her sake as well, I want to deliver a healthy baby. My father-in-law has also driven me to the hospital a few times. I've been blessed with wonderful in-laws. And then there was yesterday, my due date. Seeing no changes in my condition made me anxious. It's the due date, but the baby hasn't come out yet, huh? When I voiced my worries to George before he left for work, he became irritated as he hurriedly prepared to leave.
If the labor pains haven't started, it means it's not time yet. There's no point in overthinking it. The baby will come out when it's ready.
He left for work after saying this indifferently. It's not that I wanted him to do anything in particular. I just wanted him to understand and empathize with my anxious feelings. We've argued about this several times during my pregnancy. George always says,
"There's no point in overthinking. Things will work out." Does worrying achieve anything?
Maybe he's right, but giving birth is a matter of life and death. He was indifferent when my morning sickness was severe and when I had painful contractions. When we found out I was pregnant, he was so happy. What happened?
I'm going to be a dad.
I remember how delighted he was when we went shopping for baby supplies together. But slowly, his attitude changed. And by the time I reached the stable period of my pregnancy, he had become noticeably cold. Maybe it was because work was particularly busy at the time. But I wished he would listen more, show more concern. With these feelings, I've made it to today. Even today, a day past the due date, George left for work with his usual expression. Despite my frustrations, I prioritized the baby in my belly and managed to see George off with a normal expression. And about an hour later, that's when what seems like labor pains began. I tried calling the hospital, but they told me to wait and see since my contractions were still far apart. I prepared my hospital bag and rested, waiting for the time to come. By the afternoon, my contractions were getting closer together, and so I called a taxi and went to the hospital. I tried to call George, but he didn't answer, so I sent him an email and admitted myself to the hospital right away. I couldn't rely on my in-laws either, as they were at work. From that point on, all I remember is enduring the intense pain. The pain was excruciating, and I felt alone and anxious. I felt like I was going to pass out from the pain several times. George finally arrived at the hospital in the evening, and to make things worse, he seemed to have had some alcohol. Really? Today of all days? Even after I told him I was in labor? He excused himself saying, "I had a sudden drinking party, but I only had 1 beer." He seemed proud, almost as if he thought not having more than 1 beer was something commendable. This drove me mad. What? Even 1 beer is still drinking. You reek of alcohol. Don't come into my room like this. Get out. Between the bellyache and the smell of alcohol, I didn't even know what I was saying anymore. At that point, a nurse who came to check on me kicked George out and I was left alone once again. I spent a restless night and before I knew it, it was morning. It seems like the baby will be born soon. After moving to the delivery room and waiting for a while, George, who seemed to have sobered up by then, came in. What does he want now? I wanted to say that, but I didn't even have the energy to speak. Finally, my son was born safely. Despite nearly passing out from the pain, I felt relieved when I saw my son crying healthily. When the nurse handed my son to George, he hesitated but eventually held him. I was vaguely thinking, so he's a dad now, when George made an outrageous remark. "He doesn't look like me at all. Whose kid is this?" Saying that, he pushed our son back to the nurse. What? I didn't understand what was happening and glared at George. "Get out!" Even though I didn't want to speak because of the pain, I told George succinctly, and he left the room without a word. What is he thinking? Could such a thing happen? I didn't have the energy to worry about what had happened to George, and I was just furious. My son was taken to the nursery, and I was taken to my room, but I couldn't rest because I was too angry. Still, because I was so exhausted, I fell asleep without realizing it. Taking care of my son kept me busy every day, and my 5-day hospital stay flew by. George came to see our son and me from time to time, but because we were in separate rooms, we only spent a few minutes together. My mother-in-law accompanied me when I was discharged, but George apparently went to work. My mother-in-law, who seemed oblivious to George's antics, adored and cared for our son, telling how cute my baby boy is all the time. My father-in-law, who had left work early, also came to our house. He and my mother-in-law looked after our son, so I was able to rest a bit. I was truly grateful to my in-laws. In the evening, as my mother-in-law was preparing dinner, George came home. Welcome back. I greeted him, but he was cold and unresponsive. As soon as he entered the living room, he pulled an envelope out of his bag. Without even holding our son, he smirked and called me over. "Ellie, I have something to talk about." I was annoyed by his attitude, but what happened next was even more unbelievable. George took out some documents from the envelope and thrust them in my face. "I had it tested. It's not my child, so we're getting a divorce. This proves your affair." What? I couldn't help but let out a strange sound, and my mother-in-law's hand stopped as she was cooking. My father-in-law, who was holding our son, froze and looked at George. Despite the 3 of us being dumbfounded, George had a smug look on his face. "When he was born, I thought he didn't look like me at all, so I secretly had a DNA test done." And? I sighed and prompted him to continue. "So, look at this." The document he showed me had some complicated words and numbers, but I read aloud the sentence that caught my eye. "The tested individual cannot be excluded as the biological father." George snorted confidently. "Excluded means I'm not the father, right?" "What? 0 reading comprehension?" I calmly retorted. "If he's not excluded, it means you are the father." Then George started to panic. "What? No way." I remembered what happened during the birth and became angry again. "So you said all those things back then because you suspected me of cheating?" I clearly remember George saying, "Whose kid is this?" when he saw our newborn son. I said it in front of my in-laws. They were furious. "George, how could you?" "What were you thinking, doing that to Ellie when she was going through so much?" As George was scolded by his parents, he started to make excuses. "Well, Ellie's workplace was full of men, and she often went to drinking parties. There were days when she came home late, so of course I'd be worried." I started to get annoyed with George, who was glancing at me as he spoke. "Look, I reported every drinking party, and you even picked me up when I was going to be late, remember? And still you suspected me?" But George still laughed as if he was right. "Well, you know, I've seen stories on the internet about people raising their affair partner's child, right? When I was talking to a coworker, they said I should have a DNA test done." "Oh, I see. There might be no point in talking to this man." "Really? You took the word of the internet and some stranger over me? You trusted the stories of people you don't even know instead of me?" My anger wouldn't subside. "I struggled with morning sickness and went through a tough labor just to give birth to a healthy child for you, George. And this is what you were thinking?" My mother-in-law broke down in tears, and my father-in-law was furious. "I can't believe this." As I angrily slapped the documents out of George's hand, he tried to pick them up but dropped his bag and something unexpected fell out. I couldn't believe my eyes. What's this? There was a divorce form in George's bag. Are you planning to divorce? Suddenly, George lost all his earlier momentum and became flustered.
No, this isn't,
I found myself no longer able to tolerate his attitude. You've gone to the trouble of preparing divorce papers, and now you're telling me you don't want a divorce? I snatched the divorce papers, clutching a pen tightly. My husband tried to stop me, but in that moment, his smartphone rang. It was the sound of an incoming email. My hand, clutching the pen, stopped. I had a bad feeling about this. When did his behavior and words start to seem strange? It had been weird since summer, after spring had passed. What is this unease? On impulse, I snatched my husband's phone. Holding back my husband, who was trying to retrieve it in a panic, I unlocked the screen. Displayed, there was something unbelievable. I read it out loud. Have you filled out the divorce papers yet? It wasn't your child anyway, right? Claim alimony from your wife, and let's go on a lavish trip. What's this? My bad feeling turned out to be true. I thought it was strange. You suddenly accused me of cheating, and I wondered where that idea came from. Could it be because you were the one cheating? That's it, isn't it? That's why you thought I was cheating too. My husband's face turned pale. Who is this woman? Could it be from a new employee or something? You must have become the person in charge of the new employees this spring and got close to her, right? That makes sense. Your behavior started to change because you were cheating with her. That's why you were coming home late and claiming to work on holidays, probably just going on dates, right? I spoke calmly about what I had been thinking. Seeing that my husband didn't say anything back, it seemed that I wasn't far off the mark. My father-in-law, hearing this, was furious again.
Is this true?
As my husband averted his gaze, my father-in-law's fist hit him in the face. My father-in-law bowed deeply to me.
Ellie, I'm truly sorry for my stupid son.
My husband was also made to bow alongside his father and was interrogated.
You should be the one apologizing. Tell the whole truth.
The woman my husband had cheated with was close to what I had guessed. She was a younger woman who had transferred from another branch, and my husband, who was in charge of her training, seemed to have developed the affair. Moreover, it seemed she was also married, although she didn't have a child. I was flabbergasted and quickly filled out the divorce papers. I thrust them back at my husband. Write it down quickly.
Ellie, I'm sorry, please reconsider. I admit my mistakes.
I could only look at my apologetic husband with cold eyes. No way. I don't need someone who won't be there for me when I'm hurting the most. I don't want to see your face anymore. You thought our son wasn't yours, so you don't have to see him again. Well, I will take child support though. Prompted by my father-in-law, my husband filled out the divorce papers. When my father-in-law is a witness, we discussed alimony and child support. While all this was happening, my mother-in-law, who had taken my son somewhere, returned. She silently handed something to my husband. A confused George took it and opened it to find an old photo album. In it was a picture of a baby who looked just like our son now. It looks just like him. There's no way he's not your child. My mother-in-law coldly dropped the bomb. Pictures from the time when George was born, he looks just like our son. Seeing that, George was utterly shocked.
But he doesn't look anything like me.
He started to make excuses. At that point, I lost my patience. If a newborn baby looks exactly like you as an adult, wouldn't that be scary? Didn't you realize that? Looking at that photo, it's undoubtedly your child.
No, it's not that. It's just, everyone kept saying it. I believed it from the beginning.
Liar, if you believed it, you wouldn't have insisted on a DNA test. Always blaming others, take some responsibility for your actions. You were neglecting your pregnant wife and having an affair. That's a fact. It doesn't change. Moreover, you were swayed by your mistress, doubted your wife, and even did a DNA test with your newborn son. Is there any sincerity in any of these actions? None, right? While I was suffering, you were having an affair. I am not so generous to forgive someone like that. I launched into him without even taking a breath. George kept apologizing, but of course, I didn't forgive him. We ended up getting a divorce. Rumors about George's affair spread at work, making his job difficult and causing him to make mistake after mistake. As a result, he was transferred to a different branch in Nebraska. I thought about moving back to my parents' house, but considering it's not good to travel long distances postpartum, I've been living in George's now empty family home, and my son is growing up healthy. George was severely scolded by his parents, and he has been using his savings to pay alimony. Under the watchful eye of his father-in-law, he pays the alimony every month. Of course, we've also sought damages from the woman he had the affair with. Thanks to that, her husband found out about the affair, which was a double betrayal, and they ended up divorcing. I heard she's now working at a bar. George was a foolish husband, but I'm grateful for the supportive in-laws who are there to watch our son grow up with me. I am very satisfied.
My name is James Brown. I'm in my late 20s, a typical age for having a full-time job, but due to certain circumstances, I'm currently juggling multiple part-time jobs. The main gig I've got is at a restaurant. Being a part of a well-known chain, the place turns tables fast, making it a hectic work environment, but that also makes it fulfilling. Above all, it's thanks to this job that I met her. My first ever girlfriend, Melissa Miller, happens to be the daughter of the owner of the restaurant where I work. Melissa chose to work at the restaurant because her father owns it. She never hid that fact. However, the rest of the staff misunderstood Melissa. They assumed she was just a spoiled rich girl dabbling in a part-time job for fun. As a result, they gave her only easy tasks and treated her cautiously so they can avoid upsetting the boss's daughter. Melissa seemed to hate that approach. Eager to show everyone that she was different, she proactively asked questions about what she didn't understand and took the initiative in her tasks. Her hard work paid off in a month and everyone recognized her efforts. Now, no one treats Melissa partial. I once wondered why someone as charming as Melissa, both as a person and a woman, chose to be with a guy like me, and I asked her. She blushed and confessed shyly, "You were the only one who never changed your attitude towards me from the start. Your guidance was strict, but I thought of you as the most trustworthy person." I'm the one who asked, but I remember with fondness when I heard it. Being drawn to Melissa, who was honest and diligent, seemed like a natural progression. We've been on countless dates, including our shifts at work. We were together almost every day, and my feelings for Melissa grew stronger with each passing day. Fortunately, she said she felt the same way. I doubt there will ever be a woman more ideal than Melissa in my future. More than anything, I don't want to hand Melissa over to someone else. With that in mind, I proposed to Melissa, although I thought I won't make it. But to my surprise, Melissa nodded, tears streaming down her face. We decided to meet each other's families in preparation for our future. First, we were going to meet Melissa's parents. Melissa's home was exactly as I imagined, a standalone house that screamed wealth at first glance. The garage was filled with famous foreign cars. I suddenly became conscious of what I was wearing. I thought I chose the best outfit from my wardrobe, but I'm not sure if it will be acceptable to Melissa's parents. James? I snapped back to reality when Melissa called my name. I muster up some courage to counteract my self-doubt. I tell myself that maybe Melissa's parents are not the kind of people to care about such things, as I follow behind Melissa. In the living room we're shown to, there's a woman who looks a lot like Melissa and a stern-looking man waiting. I assume they must be Melissa's parents. I brace myself internally, look them straight in the eyes, and make my introduction. My name is James Brown. I've been dating Melissa. Thank you for providing this opportunity despite your busy schedules. My voice cracks from the nervousness, but I wait silently for their response. Well, it's best to get things like this done sooner rather than later, replies Melissa's father. I respond to his voice and lift my head. But contrary to my expectations, his gaze was cold. I feel the same cold gaze from Melissa's mother, too. I suck in a breath as I realize the atmosphere is clearly not favorable. Melissa's father pulls out several pieces of paper from an envelope and places them on a table. Just as Melissa and I are looking perplexed, her father speaks up. We've done some research on you. What? Melissa regains her composure and confronts her father. What does that mean, Dad? Her father responds with a matter-of-fact expression. It's only natural to look into the man who's going to marry our precious daughter. I heard from the manager of the diner where Melissa works about your reputation. Immediately, I had a bad feeling. I knew the manager wouldn't say anything good about me. He seemed to hate me since long before. I think he was jealous because I was reliable to the other staff and because I was dating Melissa. As expected, Melissa's father looked at me with contempt. We heard you're incompetent at work and have no prospects of becoming a full-time employee. Also, we heard that you're poor and juggling multiple part-time jobs. Melissa's mother looked me up and down with a sneer. We can't possibly entrust Melissa to someone like that. I could feel my face getting hot with embarrassment. Melissa tried to interrupt with anger, but I hurriedly stopped her. Although I appreciate Melissa's feelings, the fact that I'm living off a part-time job and don't spend money on clothes or appearance is true. I opened my mouth to somehow salvage my reputation, but Melissa's father beat me to it. Surely you're not still thinking you can marry Melissa? As I was lost for words, Melissa, who couldn't hold back anymore, spoke up. No matter what you say, Dad, I'm going to marry him. What are you saying? There's no way you can be happy marrying a poor man like this, retorted her father. But Melissa stared back at him and responded, It doesn't matter if he's poor. I'm going to work too, Melissa defended. At Melissa's words, her mother let out a shriek. What? You plan to let Melissa work even after you're married? Enough, Mom. It was my decision to work together. Neither of them would listen to Melissa. Melissa's father probably blames me for everything. He glares at me as if I were his mortal enemy. I get it now. You're just after a free ride, aren't you? Just what kind of family did you grow up in? I'd love to see the faces of your parents. Upon hearing her father's words, I could feel my blood rushing to my head. Before I knew it, I spoke up. I don't care what you say about me, but I won't stand for you disrespecting my parents. As I spoke directly back at him, I saw a tremble of uncertainty in his eyes, but it soon vanished, replaced by a patronizing smile. So, you're finally showing your true colors. I won't let a savage poor guy like you marry my daughter, I instantly retorted. Then, I don't need her. I don't want to be related to people like you. With a final word, I stormed out of their house. I could hear them arguing behind me, but I didn't turn back. I walked on, my head still hot with anger. Then I heard my name called out from behind and turned around. Melissa had chased after me, panting heavily. I finally came back to my senses and stopped. I'm sorry, James, for the terrible things my parents said. Looking at Melissa bowing deeply, I regained my composure. Feeling guilty for the situation with Melissa, I was at a loss for words. Melissa apologized again and then said something surprising. I ran away from home. What? I asked back, and Melissa looked into my eyes seriously. I told them I wouldn't go home until they apologized to you, James. I tried to convince her several times after that, but Melissa wouldn't budge about going home. I had to make up my mind. But I couldn't just leave things as they were between Melissa and her parents. I called my dad. After briefly explaining what happened, he told me to bring Melissa to a certain place. It was lucky enough that I was able to get in touch with my dad, who had been busy these past few days, but I hadn't expected to introduce Melissa to him so suddenly. Melissa seemed nervous about the sudden development. I reassured her and headed for the designated hotel. It was a famous high-end hotel from the same chain as the diner we worked at. I escorted a bewildered Melissa into the restaurant inside the hotel. My father was already there, and we were guided to his table by the staff. Sorry for the wait. No problem, I just got here myself. Upon spotting my father, Melissa greeted him nervously. Nice to meet you. I'm Melissa Miller. My father returned the greeting and suggested that Melissa take a seat. He was already aware of the events of the day. I thought we would immediately discuss the issue, but Dad suggested we first have our meal. Melissa looked surprised but visibly relaxed as she started eating. I decided to follow my father's lead and enjoy the meal. For a while, we enjoyed a pleasant atmosphere, but after the meal was over, the mood shifted. Melissa noticed it too and straightened up. Melissa? Yes? When Melissa responded to her name being called, Dad handed her a key card. While blinking in surprise, she accepted it. I've booked a room in this hotel for you. You should stay the night. No. I couldn't possibly impose. But my father shook his head at Melissa's panicked response. It's fine, but you have to go home tomorrow. Melissa paled at my father's words. I rushed to interject, but he held up a hand to stop me. First, listen. I'm not saying you have to go home because I disapprove of you two. I'm just advising that running away from home on impulse won't lead to good outcomes. Well, you're right, but my father won't understand unless I do something like this. After a sigh of relief, Melissa apologetically spoke up. However, for some reason, my father responded with a cunning smile. In that case, I'll visit your home tomorrow. Leave it to me. Melissa looked shocked at my father's unexpected words. Dad addressed Melissa in a serious tone, but only if you're okay with it after hearing what I have to say. My father's words were shocking to both Melissa and me. For Melissa, this would likely affect her life significantly, but she never once looked away, agreeing to my father's proposal. Dad seemed satisfied with her response. Together with my father and Melissa, I visited her home. Her father seemed relieved that Melissa had returned, but when he noticed that I was with her, he glared at me. "You're the one who led Melissa astray?" Melissa quickly glared back at her father-in-law, replying, "No, I made the decision to leave home on my own." "You've been deceived. You can't be happy with this pauper." At her father's words, Melissa was about to retort in anger, her face turning red, but my father gently placed a hand on her shoulder, stopping her. He hadn't expected there to be anyone else present. My father-in-law finally seemed to notice my father's presence. The color gradually drained from my father-in-law's face. Sweating profusely, he called out my father's name. Are you... Could you possibly be President Brown? Well, I'd hope you'd recognize the face of the parent company's president, my father replied, grinning. In contrast to my father's cheerful expression, the father-in-law's face was growing more and more pale. My mother-in-law, too, was noticeably shaken by the abrupt change in her husband's demeanor and words. "Why, is President Brown? Wait, your last name is Brown. He's my father," I said, pointing at my dad. Upon hearing this, my father-in-law showed his apology all of a sudden. "I am truly sorry for what I have done." My father, still smiling, asked, "What are you apologizing for exactly?" My father-in-law responded in a trembling voice, "For belittling James." "Is that so? I had no idea that he was the president's son." Unfazed, my father began to speak. "Actually, I had James work as a part-timer at a few stores for his future's sake." My father-in-law's shoulders twitched. "We discovered a few issues in the process, especially in relation to the family restaurants." My father-in-law couldn't bring himself to look up. "In the past few years, we've seen an increase in complaints. And it's not just one store, it's a trend across the board. We finally understood the reason recently." My father-in-law was trembling. "It seems that the full-time employees, especially those in positions of power, aren't doing their work, pushing it on to the part-timers instead. Even though there are enough people, the work isn't getting done. What is worse, the management seems to be hiding this up." I nodded in agreement with my father's words. "I've pointed out the issue to the manager several times in the past. The situation improved after Melissa came along, though." My father-in-law glared at me, face flushed with anger, but noticing Melissa's gaze, he hurriedly looked away. Melissa was giving him a look of contempt. My father continued, speaking calmly. "We've also confirmed that you've been making various deals behind the scenes with those people. Is that right, ma'am?" Suddenly, called out, my mother-in-law's shoulders shook. Yes? Haven't you noticed that his finances have been suspiciously good these past few years?" My father's question made my mother-in-law gasp, her face showing sudden realization. Come to think of it, wait, you don't mean... My father-in-law, going pale, couldn't say anything. Melissa delivered the final blow. "You're the worst." My father-in-law was left speechless, looking stunned. My father then delivered his verdict. "You're going to resign the owner. The official resignation order will be issued next week. For the sake of both of you, I'll keep the details private. But if you want to stay with the company, you'll have to start from scratch. Take your time to decide." Leaving Melissa's parents in their shamed silence, my father and I left their house. Eventually, my father-in-law chose to remain with the company. After I quit my job at the diner, Melissa became the manager and my father-in-law started working there as a regular staff member. Under Melissa's watchful eye, my father-in-law probably won't be able to pull any tricks. As for me, I'm currently working as the head of the HR department at our company's headquarters. I occasionally make appearances on site. Of course, that includes the place where I used to work. Melissa, James. When I stopped by after work, Melissa and my father-in-law, who were tidying up after closing time, were there. My father-in-law was worrying about my mood. With a wry smile, I spoke. There's no official announcement yet, but Melissa's name has been mentioned as the next CEO of the diner. Of course, it wouldn't be immediate, and there will be a lot of things that you won't understand. My father-in-law, surprised, looked at Melissa. Melissa nodded in response. Watching them, I continued. So, I'd like you to start teaching Melissa a little bit from now on, and in the future, I'd appreciate it if you could support Melissa. It'll be tough for her to handle everything alone if we have a child. When I mentioned having a child, Melissa returned my comment with a happy smile. I looked at my father-in-law again and said, of course, if you refuse, that's fine. In that case, we'll ask the acting CEO to take over. As I said that, my father-in-law hurriedly bowed his head. No, I'll do it. Please let me. Surely, there would be things he'd need to hear from the current CEO, as his approach would be different from the time my father-in-law was in charge. But depending on my father-in-law's willingness, he might be able to step up as the CEO again until Melissa takes over. Seeing my father-in-law's determination to face his job seriously, both Melissa and I shared a smile.